In this week's video, I'm going to show you how to throw one of my favorite things on the wheel, and that we have is a platter. And so we're going to be using about 6 pounds of clay. This one was probably closer to 4, so what you'll see is a little bigger. And we have it where it's nice and straight walled. When you throw it, you can have it curved, but I prefer the straight. I think it looks a little more fun. So here we go. Let's get to it. So we got the 6 pound ball of clay, or slightly under 6, and throwing this, going back to my previous videos that you've seen or hopefully have seen, we're following the same steps. We're still centering the same way, we're still compressing, we're still doing all those steps. One thing that is a little different on this wheel than on yours is this is propped up much higher. My legs are below the level of the main surface of the wheel. So when I sit straight up, my belly button is basically at the splash pan. So I'm going to have my hands resting on the splash pan a lot more. And you may see my hands floating up in the air. So just one thing to keep in mind when you see the way my body's oriented versus when you're on the wheel. So enough of that disclaimer, let's get going. So I got my clay. The first thing I want to do is do my little rotation here. And this is going to help create a little point in the center. And I'm going to take that point, find the center of my bat, and slam it down. Next, I'm going to do something called slap centering. And so what I'm doing is I'm kind of tapping it and rotating the wheel. This is going to help me more or less get the clay in center before I actually start throwing, because I want this as centered as possible. So now that is more or less secure to the wheel. I spin my wheel and I can see it's pretty centered. This top section is slightly off, so I can tap that a little more. And the benefit of slap centering is when you throw larger amounts of clay, this reduces the amount of coning up and down you need to do. This bottom edge is slightly off, but I can get that fixed when I cone up and down. So I got it stuck to the bat. I'm going to seal my edge at 3 o'clock. And then I'm going to push it down to make sure it's extra stuck. So I'm adding a little water on the clay, water on my hands, and I'm going to go ahead and do my first push down. All right, so my first push down is good. Now I'm going to go ahead and start coning the clay up and down until I got it centered. And if you need any help on centering, you can refer back to my previous videos that go over that in depth. So here we go. Let's start coning up and down. So thank you again for watching the video. And if you like this kind of videos and you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe. And if you want to see anything else in particular in future videos, don't hesitate to comment below. So when we start coning up and down, just to recap, your left hand falls and it's pushing into the clay, using your body as leverage behind it. Your right hand pulls the sponge towards your body. So you're pushing and pulling the clay towards center, causing it to rise up. Once the clay starts rising, your hands rise with the clay, and then your left hand drapes over the top to round. So that's coning up. If a skirt is formed, use your sponge to push that down and away, and then you can go ahead and start coning down. So the way I like coning down, I brace with my right hand on the outside, left hand on the top, and I'm pushing the clay diagonally forward, and then my right hand squeezing in at the base, and then my hand spreads out from my thumb, and then I bring it down. Then I can bring in my karate chop, which is the most user and beginner friendly centering technique when it comes to coning down. And I can just karate chop this. So my right hand is applying downwards, forwards pressure. My left hand is applying pressure forward as well. And I'm compressing it down. All right, so now I'm ready to dig my well. So a few things about creating this platter. The width of your base is more or less the width of what your platter is going to be. So if you have a really wide base when you start digging your well, your foot area when you trim it is going to be more or less wide. So it really depends on how big you want the bottom. If you want more of a dramatic lip going outwards, you want a tighter base. And you can see that my bottom isn't completely centered, but it's fine because when I start digging my well and opening, I can recenter that little wobble. All right, so let's go ahead, get my thumbs, apply downwards pressure. So using all those techniques I've taught in the previous videos, using slip so I don't need water, turning my thumbs sideways so I can get a deeper, wider well. And now we're starting to dive in for more advanced throwing with larger amounts of clay. And so I'm just getting this depth to 1/2 inch thick. You can see a slight wobble on the outside, but I'm not too concerned about that. All right, so I got my depth and I'm ready to open. So I'm going to show a different way to open. The ways I showed in my videos were thumbs inside, pointer fingers outside, squeezing and pulling my thumbs towards midnight. This is a little different, slightly more advanced, but this is the way I normally throw. So I put my pinky ring and middle finger on the inside, my pointer finger on my left hand on the outside, and I'm basically squeezing and pulling the clay. My sponge is on the outside to support the clay, and that's going to help remove the slight wobble you see here. So this would be the first open, and I'm moving my whole left hand, the fingers that are inside, outwards. And this finger right here is basically to support the rim. Okay, so that's to open, and now I'm ready to pull. And so for my first pull, I'm going to go ahead and basically bring my pointer finger back in, pinch the clay, and then my right hand is going to support outside, touching my thumb, and I'm going to lift up. Okay, so this is my first pull. So push in the clay at the base, push out the clay on the inside with my left pointer finger, and I pull up. So this is an even more aggressive pull than the first way I showed in the dig, open, and pull series. All right, so that was my first pull. Setting up my cylinder. You can see my outside more or less got recentered. My top looks good, and I'm ready to start my second pull. So my hands can more or less still fit by pushing out on the inside with my pointer finger. My thumb, I'm still keeping draped out for support against my right hand, and I'm gonna do my first pull. So I push out, push in, and then I pull up. So this is my first official regular pull. And because this is going to be a platter, I'm going to make sure to keep my rim a little thicker. I bring my pointer finger out as I finish the pull, and then I can actually do a compression all at the same time. Okay, I'm going to do a quick collar to bring this top inward a little bit. Do a nice compression at the rim, and continue my pulls. My goal is to get this bottom section about 1/4 inch thick, and I'm going to be pulling it straight up. My top, I'm going to keep around 1/2 inch, maybe slightly thinner. And one thing to remember, as you throw something that's very wide, you got to keep your rim a little thicker, because as you open it up, that clay is going to stretch out and become thinner. So if your rim is really thin and you stretch it, it'll become even thinner as you get your final shape. So let's go ahead and do my next pull. Push out, you can see the bump form, push in underneath, and pull. And remember, as you rise, you're releasing the pressure. Get my other hand out. Get to the rim, leave it there for a few seconds, and release. Do a compression, push in, push out, and pull. Release as you rise. And then you can do a compression to the top. So that's another variation. If you feel like bringing your pointer finger out is too weird, you can bring your thumb out and have that support. Okay, so kind of recapping to see clay thickness. The depth is already good, but if you wanted to check wall thickness, you basically pick your spot, take your needle, stab it into the clay wall, have it touch your inside finger, pinch, and pull out. And you can check for thickness that way. So I'm going to check over here because this is where I wanted 1/4 inch. Stab, feel for the tip, and pull. So I'm still closer to 1/2 inch. Same thing. Push out, push in, pull up. All right, let's check for thickness again. We're a little more than 1/4 inch, so I'll do one more pull, this time not as aggressive, and I'm really going to taper the pool as I rise because I don't want this part getting too thin. And because this is going to stretch out into that very wide platter, technically you want the bottom the thinnest and thicker as you rise to where you get to the rim, which should be the thickest. And that way, as you stretch the clay, it should more or less even out to the same thickness, which is the goal of 1/4 inch. So one more pull, focusing the push out at the very bottom of the piece. Okay, and then this pull, I'm going to kind of stop it halfway or 3/4. I'm not going to go all the way up because I don't want to over thin the clay above it. So right there, the clay is kind of just getting distributed, and I'm not really doing a final pull. I'm just kind of going through the motions to the top. And right there, I feel like my cylinder is more or less set up. So I'm ready to start the shaping of this. And that is the fun, but also scary part. All right, so for the shaping, I have 2 ribs. And the way I like doing it is by having my straighter, longer rib on the outside and having my shorter, rounder rib on the inside. And the way that I like doing this shaping, basically the outside rib, which is going to be this one here, is going to set the angle. Once I set the angle, I'm going to take this inside rib and I'm going to push the clay to match the angle and then slide it up all the way, and both will slide up. So basically I set the angle, push, line, slide. Set the new angle, push, slide, and line. And I'm going to do that throughout the entire piece until this really flares out and opens, so that the final angle will be closer to, like, what is that, a 45. So I start at the top, lay the clay into this tool, and start shaping. And so sometimes I might need to use the round side to do the initial laying into the straight tool, but we'll see how the angles work. So I dip this in water, and when I put this on the clay wall, I don't want it straight or perpendicular to the curve. I want to angle it towards me so it doesn't skip. So as you're using ribs, if you ever notice it skipping as you are applying pressure into the clay wall, it's probably too straight to the wall. You have to angle it inward or outward. So here we go. Spin the wheel. I'm going to set this first angle here. So I'm going to keep that at a slight angle, and I'm going to use the round side, and I'm going to be pushing the tool into the wall to close that gap to make it more or less straight. And it will take clay off, and you can scrape that against whatever container you have throughout the process. And one thing I forgot to mention, there are holes in here, and those holes I like putting my fingers, my thumb and my pointer, or thumb and middle, whatever is comfortable. All right, set my new angle. So I'm not going to go all the way down to the bottom yet. I'm going to start expanding a little higher up. So set my new angle and push the tool into the clay wall until the clay touches the outside rib, the right-hand rib, and then slide upwards. And so I'm just basically repeating this over and over and over again until I get my final shape. So you basically can stop whenever you want. So now I'm going to go a little more aggressive. I'm going to start over here, and I'm going to just basically do a very aggressive shape out. And I'm not really setting my angle. I'm just kind of more or less pushing the tool and using this as the guide. Okay. Now this one I will set the angle, and I'll just use the inside tool to match. All right, there we go. We're slowly getting this to open up, and it's going to take some time, especially when you first start off. So don't rush and just go slow. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead, set the angle, use the inside tool to push it out to match. Once it touches the tool, I then start sliding this up. When I get to the very top, I kind of bring both out to flare. Yes. Then I fill any gaps that I see. So you can see my inside has this weird little bump because I haven't really touched that yet. basically from here straight up was the original angle. So now I'm going to start pushing this wall. So when I do that, I'm not going to use any rib on the outside. I'm just going to use this rib on the inside to kind of push this out to invert it. So instead of bumping in, it's going to bump out. And I'll be able to straighten it out a little later. So to do that, I'm basically just using the widest point of the tool and I'm applying pressure. And my outside hand is just supporting that area on the outside. And I'm just kind of pushing this out to create a rounded shape. So very similar to shaping a bowl at the base, because technically this is just a bowl, but with straight walls. And I'm just inverting that shape to push it out. And then I'm just going to drag it up. So now that I have this curve, the piece is actually going to be a little stronger because that curve adds extra strength because there's no real sharp angle that was once there. And for the inside, I can actually take this water out. And there is some slight unevenness on the base, but I can adjust that later. So now I'm going to go ahead and start really expanding this because now this wall is more or less straight from top to bottom. And you'll really start seeing this go outwards and really get full. So I'm going to use the sponge and then just drape it over the surface and then use my fingers to kind of compress and just round it out. And I don't want it too sharp this early in the process because that can get really thin and break apart. So we're going to go ahead and continue the shaping. So just to recap, I set my new angle, take the inside, push the wall to match the angle, slide and parallel up the wall. Okay. So setting this new angle here, pushing the clay to match. And I'm doing it nice and slow so the clay has time to stretch outwards into it. And if the angle's too great, I can change it to make it match just so I don't stretch the clay out too fast. I was noticing that doing straight on straight was giving me too much drag as I pulled through. So I'm switching to the curve on straight. So as you do this, make adjustments to match how you throw and how the clay is treating the process as you go through it. And so as you throw this, depending on how dry or wet your clay is, you might need to stop around this stage and use a heat gun or a torch to dry the surface, just so that your clay won't collapse on you, because that has happened to me a lot in the past. But this clay was a little on the stiffer side, so I should be able to go a little more before I consider drying it out. All right, for demo's sakes, I'm gonna keep it as is. Normally I would flare this out a little more, but before I finish it off, I wanna adjust the middle, and then this little bump here I wanna take care of. So first off is to adjust the middle. I got my rice paddle, and I'm just gonna go ahead and use this to compress the bottom, and then just bring this outward. And what this does is it helps compress to prevent any S-cracks from forming, and it just levels it out and gets it a little more finished. And then I'm going to go ahead and work on this angle I have right where the edge of the tool is touching right now. And so there's a weird transition that goes from the base, and then there's this little bump here. And so I'm not a fan of this, and I'm actually going to trim this away. So a few tips on trimming this section. Make sure you grab a tool that you're comfortable with. And this bump is a little on the thinner side. So where my finger is on the outside here, it's right over here where this bump is. So I cannot take too much off of this without really getting it too thin. So I'm just gonna take a little bit off, and I'm gonna push that clay wall out from the inside. So when you trim, one thing to keep in mind, the clay is really wet. So as you trim and remove clay, you have to try your best to pull it off before it gets stuck to the clay, or it's gonna be a real pain to remove. So I'm gonna go ahead and just do one pass. And I'm gonna stop, pick off the clay that I don't want. And that little bit got a little stuck, so I'm just going to scrape it off. Add a little bit of water to smooth it, and then I'm just gonna play with that angle using the rib, and I'm gonna have my hands on the outside to support the clay. Okay, so supporting the outside with my hand, you could use a rib too, and now I'm just gonna kind of push that edge out to make it a little less dramatic of a transition. Now that will change the outside shape of your piece, so that can be adjusted and fixed when we trim. Okay, so that angle looks a little better. Now I'm going to use the straight side to kind of even it out. Outside hand still there to support. I created a slight bump on the outside, but like I said, I can trim that away later. And I am trying my best just to make this transition from wall to base to wall a little more seamless. So I think that looks pretty good. And this rim right here that's slightly off and dancing, I can go ahead and cut that when the clay is at trimming consistency. And I can use an X-Acto knife. The reason why I don't like cutting it now is because when I use the needle and I drag it, if it shifts on me, I can end up collapsing this whole thing. So right now the inside looks good. We're just gonna create a little groove at the bottom and wire this bad boy off. Now we have the final view. Last steps, create a little groove at the base, wire it off, and let it dry for trimming. And I'll have another video on trimming this because we do have a lot of clay at the bottom, and I'm gonna show how to remove that clay to reveal the nice wall that we have from top to bottom. So we'll spin the wheel, create the little groove. And now in this angle, you can kind of see the clay wall dancing a little bit. And I'm not too concerned with that because when it's stopped, you can't really see it. And if I really wanted to fix that, I'll have to dry this a little bit and it's really compress and hold my hands or tools there. And I could recenter it, but I'm not too worried about it. Okay, so I created the groove, get the wire in place, and cut. All right, and there we go. We have the platter, one of my favorite shapes, and the width from wall to wall is a little, pretty close to 14 inches, and the height, we have about 4. Hopefully you enjoyed watching this video. Hopefully you can now use what you saw and make your own, because these are one of my favorite pieces, and it's really not that hard. And if you like the video, you like this kind of content, please like it. Please subscribe. It helps my channel grow, and that way I can keep producing more tutorial videos for you folks. And lastly, if you have anything you want to see in the future for videos, please comment and let me know so I can get things done for you guys. Thank you for watching and have a good day.